The loudest sound at the Saturday baseball game was not the cheering, it was the silence around the one woman standing alone. The Florida sun was strong that afternoon, turning the metal bleacher warm and bright. Parents filled the stands with folding chairs, coolers, and loud voices. Some wore team shirts with their children's names printed across the back. Others passed around snacks and laughed as if it was the center of their world. The air smelled like popcorn and fresh-cut grass. It looked like every normal youth baseball game in America. But in the middle of all that noise, one space felt different. Marissa Vaughn stood near the chain-link fence instead. She kept her arms folded loosely in front of her, as if she were holding herself. Her 10-year-old son, Caleb Vaughn, was playing right field. Every few minutes she clapped softly when he caught the ball or ran between bases. Her voice never rose above the crowd. She did not shout advice. She did not wave wildly. She simply stayed present, steady, and quiet. The seat beside her remained empty. At first it looked maybe someone had stepped away. Maybe they were running late. But as innings passed, other parents shifted closer together, forming small circles of conversation. When extra chairs opened nearby, no one moved toward Marissa. It was subtle but clear. The empty space around her grew wider. Across the field, under a patch of shade, sat Grant Hollis with his 7-year-old triplets, Avery, Nolan, and Reese. Grant balanced a small cooler at his feet and kept one eye on the game, the other on his. Years ago, when his wife left and never returned, he learned how important it was to show up. He promised himself his children would never search the stands and wonder where their parent was. So he came to every game, every school event, every practice, even if it meant working late nights after. The triplets were used to watching more than the scoreboard. They had grown up reading their father's tired eyes, sensing when bills were tight, knowing when he needed a quiet hug without asking. That day, they noticed something before. Avery nudged Nolan gently and tilted her head toward the fence. Nolan followed her gaze. Reese leaned forward, squinting slightly. All three saw the same thing. Marissa standing alone while other parents leaned each other's laughter. They also noticed Caleb. Between pitches, Caleb glanced toward the stands. His eyes scanned quickly, not for the crowd, but for someone specific. He would look left, then right, then down for a second before resetting his glove. Each time he searched, his shoulders seemed to drop just a little. Marissa checked her phone more than once. She unlocked it, stared at the screen, then locked it again. Hope flickered across her face every time it buzzed, but most of the time it did not. She slipped it back into her pocket and kept watching her son, as if pretending everything was normal. Grant followed his children's line of sight and finally noticed. He had seen Marissa before at games, always standing, always alone. He knew the rumors that drifted through the recently complicated trouble no one explained. Grant never paid much attention to gossip. He had once been the quiet parent others whispered about too, the single dad who packed 3 lunches and braided hair badly during. He remembered how isolation felt, how heavy it was to stand in public and feel invisible. The game moved into the 4th inning. Parents cheered loudly for other children, calling out nicknames and encouragement. When Caleb stepped up to bat, Marissa straightened, gripping the fence with both hands. Her knuckles turned pale against the metal. She leaned forward as if trying to send him strength without words. The first pitch flew past him. A few parents behind her muttered about performance. The second pitch came slower. Caleb swung but missed again. His jaw tightened. He looked toward the stands one more time. The triplets felt the shift. Reese whispered something softly to her. Nolan stopped eating his snack. Avery stood up slightly, as if ready to move. They did not fully understand the adult tension around Marissa, but they understood what it meant to look for someone and not find them. Grant sensed their restlessness. He placed a steady hand on Nolan's shoulder, but did not tell them to sit down. He watched Caleb closely now, too. There was a weight in the boy's stance that felt too big for 10 years old. The third pitch came in clean and straight. Caleb swung. The crack of the bat cut through the air like lightning. The ball soared past the infield, bouncing deep into the outfield grass. The crowd erupted in cheers. Parents jumped to their feet. Some shouted with excitement. Teammates yelled from the dugout. Caleb ran hard toward first base, then second. Dust kicked up behind his cleats. As he rounded the base, he turned his head toward the stands again. This time, his eyes did not just search for applause. They searched for someone who was to be there. Marissa clapped harder now, her voice trembling as she called out his name. But the empty seat beside her remained untouched. No one stepped into that. No one filled it. From across the field, the triplets understood something simple but powerful. Caleb was not just looking for. He was looking for someone who never came. And as Caleb slowed at third base, the triplets made a quiet decision that would change more than just people sat at the neck. Years before he ever noticed the seat beside Marissa, Grant Hollis had stood alone in a crowd and promised himself he would never let his children feel. Grant did not become a strong father in one big moment. He became one slowly, after the day his wife packed a suit and said parenting was not the life she wanted anymore. The triplets were only 2 years old then. Avery cried whenever the door shut too hard. Nolan refused to sleep unless someone sat beside his crib. Reese carried a small blanket everywhere, as if it could replace what she did not understand. Grant watched the car drive away and felt the world tilt, but he did not chase it. He walked back inside, picked up his children, and began the life he had not planned. Overnight, he became everything. He learned how to braid hair from online videos. He burned dinners before figuring out how to cook 3 small meals. He folded laundry after midnight and woke up before sunrise. He took extra shifts repairing office equipment, then rearranged his hours so he could pick the children up for school himself. There were days he felt invisible and nights he felt scared, but he never let the triplets see him give up. At first, other parents looked at him with quiet judgment. Some offered polite smiles that did not reach their eyes. Others asked careful questions about where the children's mother was. Grant answered simply and stopped explaining after a while. He realized people often wanted a story more than, so he focused on. He showed up. He showed up to preschool recitals where the chairs were tiny and the songs were off-key. He showed up to doctor appointments, parent-teacher conferences, and birthday parties where he was the only single father in the room. He sat in bleachers alone more times than he could count. At first, the silence beside him felt heavy, but he learned something important during. Presence mattered more than pride. Being there mattered more than fitting in. The triplets grew up watching that lesson unfold in real time. They saw how their father's tired eyes still searched for them in every performance. They learned how it felt to look into a crowd and find the one face that never failed to appear. It made them braver. It made them steadier. They understood, even at 7 years old, that love was not loud words or big promises. Love was sitting in the same spot week after week. That afternoon at the baseball field, as the sun dipped lower, Grant found himself thinking about those early. He remembered standing near fences, holding juice boxes and diaper bags, pretending not to notice when conversations stopped as he approached. He remembered the way loneliness could wrap around a person. So when he looked across the field and saw Marissa Vaughn standing alone, something in his chest tightened. He did not know her full story. He had only heard bits and pieces drifting through adult conversation. Recently divorced, complicated custody, strong opinions on both sides. Grant had learned not to trust rumors. He had once been reduced to a sentence in someone else's mouth, too. What he saw now was simpler than gossip. He saw a woman, gripping a fence like it was the only steady thing around her. The triplets noticed his silence. Avery leaned slightly against his arm. Nolan followed his father's gaze without asking questions. Reese tilted her head thoughtfully. They had learned to read the small changes in him, the way his jaw tightened when he remembered something painful. Grant hesitated. He told himself he could be wrong. Maybe Marissa liked standing. Maybe she preferred space. Maybe she was fine. But then he remembered how many times people said he was fine when he was not. He remembered how it felt when no one chose to sit beside him. The game continued, and Caleb hit that powerful ball into the outfield. The crowd roared. Grant clapped along with everyone else, proud of the boy's effort. But he watched something else too. He watched Caleb's face as he ran, the quick glance toward the slight pause, almost too small to see. The triplets saw it clearly. They understood that Caleb was not just playing for points. He was playing for someone's attention. He was playing to prove something. They knew that look because they had once searched for their own missing parent in crowded rooms. Grant felt the past and present overlap. He had once stood alone. His children had once needed reassurance that someone would stay. And now here was another child, searching the same way. When the inning ended and players began walking back toward their parents, Grant stayed seated for a moment longer. He watched Marissa straighten her shoulders as Caleb approached. She smiled brightly, almost too bright, like someone trying to fill 2 roles at once. Caleb walked slower than usual, his helmet hanging loosely at his side. The triplets stood up without being told. They did not speak loudly. They simply watched. Grant knew that sometimes the smallest decision shaped entire futures. He also knew that stepping into someone else's loneliness required courage. He had built his life around staying when others left. Now he felt that old promise rising again. He did not know exactly what but he knew he could not ignore what his children had already seen. As the field cleared and families gathered in groups, the triplets noticed Caleb walking toward Marissa with his head down, and they knew this story was only beginning. The whispers were never loud, but they were strong enough to push a woman to the edge of the bleachers without anyone. By the next week, the story around Marissa Vaughn had grown legs of its own. It moved through parking lots and snack lines, through group texts and quiet phone calls. No one said everything directly, but everyone seemed Marissa was that part was true. What was not clear were the details people filled in themselves. Her ex-husband, Daniel Vaughn, owned a popular construction company in town. His trucks were parked at community events. His name was printed on banners at charity runs. He shook hands easily and smiled wide for pictures. The community respected him. So when the divorce happened, most people decided who to believe without asking questions. Marissa did not defend herself publicly. She did not post long explanations online. She simply kept showing up to her son's baseball game and standing by the. She worked full-time as a dental assistant and picked up extra hours when she downsized to a small townhouse near the so Caleb would not have to change teams. Her life had shrunk in size but not in effort. Still, the empty space around her seemed to grow. Grant began to notice patterns. Parents who once nodded politely now avoided eye contact when Marissa walked by. Conversations stopped when she approached the bleachers. Invitations to day and birthday parties never included Caleb's name. It was not open cruelty. It was quieter than that. It was exclusion shaped like politeness. The triplets noted. Children see things adults pretend are not happening. Avery overheard two mothers whispering near the concession stand about court dates and financial settlement. Nolan heard a father mutter that Daniel had kept things classy during the split. Reese watched another child hesitate before handing Caleb a high five. None of the words made full sense to them, but the tone did. They understood when someone was being pushed out. Grant learned more one evening when he spoke briefly with the assistant coach. Daniel had missed another. According to the schedule, it was his weekend to attend. He had sent a message saying he was busy with work commitment. The assistant coach shrugged like it was normal. But Grant saw the way Caleb's eyes searched the parking lot after practice ended. Emotional isolation has a way of settling into small gestures. Caleb stopped talking as much in the dugout. He laughed when teammates joked, but it felt forced. He told others his dad was probably just busy building something important. He said it with a proud tone, but his shoulders slumped slightly afterward. The triplets saw the gap between his words and his expression. Marissa carried her own quiet burden. She knew what people were saying. She felt the stares, yet she refused to speak badly about Daniel in front of Caleb. She believed protecting her son's heart mattered more than clearing her own name. That choice required strength few people understood. Single-parent resilience does not always look loud. Sometimes it looks like standing still while others step away. Grant recognized that strength because he had lived it. After his wife left, some people assumed he must have done something wrong. Others pitied him in ways that felt sharp. He remembered how it felt to pick up his children from daycare and sense judgment without hearing a word. Watching Marissa now felt like looking into a mirror from. The triplets' protectiveness grew quietly. They began saving seats near them during games, even before knowing if Marissa would sit there. They shared snacks with Caleb without making it obvious. They asked him about school projects and video games, drawing him into their circle naturally. They did not treat him like someone broken. They treated him like someone chosen. But the adult's behavior did not improve. At the next practice, two parents moved their chairs farther down the line when Marissa arrived. The motion was small, almost casual, but clear enough to. Grant felt frustration rise inside him. He wanted to correct the unfairness, but he also knew stepping in too fast could embarrass her. Sometimes, kindness must move carefully. Caleb pretended not to see it. He tied his cleats tightly and jogged toward the field before anyone could speak. He laughed louder than usual during drills. Yet when he thought no one was watching, his eyes drifted toward the parking lot. The triplets watched him. Children as emotional gatekeepers do not need full explanation. They sense when something is wrong and when someone is carrying too much alone. Avery whispered to her siblings that Caleb's smile did not match his eyes. Nolan nodded seriously. Reese squeezed the strap of her glove as if holding a decision. Grant felt the shift, building. He could see the lines being drawn without anyone announcing them. On one side stood community comfort and on the other stood a mother and her son, steady but isolated. He knew which side his conscience leaned. As the next game day approached, the atmosphere grew even more tense. Word had spread that Daniel might attend, though no one knew for sure. Parents seemed eager to align themselves clearly. Some positioned their chairs near the center of the bleachers early, as if preparing for a social performance. When Marissa arrived that Saturday, holding Caleb's equipment bag and wearing a simple team, the reaction? A few parents shifted immediately, closing ranks in tighter circles. Empty chairs disappeared quickly, even where space had been open moments before. Grant saw it happen. The triplets saw it. And this time, the space around Marissa did not feel accidental. As the crowd rearranged itself, distance widened. The triplets realized that next game day would not look the same because they were already planning to change. The shift did not begin with adults speaking. It began with 3 children standing up. The next Saturday arrived warm and bright, just like the week before, but the air around the baseball field felt tighter. Parents arrived early, placing folding chairs in careful rows. Conversations floated across the bleachers, light and practiced. When Marissa Vaughn walked in with Caleb, carrying his gear bag over one shoulder, the reaction was subtle but clear. A few parents who had left open chairs beside them suddenly filled. Others leaned closer together. The empty space formed again before she even reached the fence. Grant Hollis noticed it immediately. He felt the familiar weight of watching someone be pushed to the edge without a single harsh word spoken. He had lived that story once. He saw the way Marissa paused for half a second, scanning for a place to stand before settling near the same stretch of fence she always chose. Before he could decide what to do, Avery stood. Nolan followed her without hesitation. Reese grabbed her water bottle and stepped down from the bleachers. The 3 of them walked across the small patch of grass with steady, natural steps. They did not look back for permission. They did not whisper plans. They simply moved toward Marissa and placed their small folding chairs right beside her. The action was simple, almost ordinary, yet it changed the entire field. Grant felt a mix of pride and nervousness as he picked up his cooler and followed. He was aware of the glances shifting toward. He sensed the quiet questions forming in other parents' eyes. But he also knew his children had made a choice rooted in kindness, not rebellion. So he placed his chair beside theirs and gave Marissa a calm, respectful nod. For a brief second, Marissa looked surprised. Her eyes widened slightly, as if she had not expected anyone to close that. Then gratitude softened her face. She thanked them quietly and shifted a step to make room, no longer standing alone against the fence. From the field, Caleb noticed immediately. As he jogged toward his position, he glanced at the stands. Instead of seeing his mother standing by herself, he saw 3 kids his age sitting beside her, with Grant just behind them. His steps slowed for a moment. Something steady replaced the uncertainty in his expression. The emotional energy around the field. Conversations quieted slightly. A few parents exchanged looks, unsure. Some returned to their phones. Others pretended not to notice. But the invisible wall had cracked. Grant kept his tone easy and natural. He began speaking with Marissa about the heat, about how fast the seasons seemed to be moving. He did not mention. He did not bring up gossip. He treated her the way he would treat her. Over time, she relaxed enough to share small pieces of her reality. She had moved into a smaller apartment after the divorce to stay close to. She worked early mornings at the dental office and late evenings doing online bookkeeping for a local store. Baseball fees were not small, but she refused to pull Caleb out of something he loved. Grant listened carefully. He heard exhaustion in her schedule, but strength in her. He recognized that kind of resilience. It was the quiet determination of a single parent who carried everything without complaint. He respected it deeply. Marissa also explained, without bitterness, that her ex-husband still held strong influence in town. Many of the parents had business ties with him. It was easier for them to align with familiarity than with a complicated. She did not blame them out loud, but the loneliness showed in her posture. Meanwhile, the triplets had already pulled Caleb into their small circle. During breaks between innings, they offered him extra snacks and joked about team mascots. They spoke to him like he had always belonged there. No pity. No awkwardness. Just easy inclusion. Caleb's shoulders lifted slightly. His smile grew more real. Unexpected kindness does not announce itself with grand speeches. Sometimes it arrives in the form of 3 small chairs placed side by side. As the game continued, Caleb played with renewed focus. He ran harder between bases. He called out encouragement to teammates. Marissa watched him with and something close to hope. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel like she was bracing against the world alone. Grant felt it too. The simple act of sitting beside someone had altered more than just seat. It had created a quiet alliance. A reminder that chosen family begins with showing up. But resilience is often tested when. During the next inning, as the sun climbed higher and the game grew more intense, Caleb returned to the dugout after a long sprint. He removed his helmet and wiped his forehead. Heat pressed down heavily. Grant noticed him sway slightly before stepping toward. Then, without warning, Caleb stumbled near first base and dropped to one knee. The field went silent as parents rushed forward, and Marissa's heart seemed to stop. Grant realized that sitting beside someone, now staying beside them, would matter even more. When Caleb fell to one knee, it was not just the heat that brought him down. It was everything he had been holding inside. The field had gone silent for a moment, but the coaches reacted quickly. Caleb was helped to the bench, given water, and checked by a volunteer medic. Within minutes, his color returned and his breathing steadied. It was not a dramatic injury. There was no panic in his body once he rested, but something in his eyes remained heavy, as if his collapse had less to do with dehydration and more to do with pressure. Marissa knelt beside him the entire time, brushing hair from his forehead, whispering steady reassurance. Grant stood a few steps back with the giving space but staying close. He recognized the look Caleb carried because he had seen it before on his own children during hard seasons. It was the look of a child trying to be stronger than he needed to be. Later that week, Marissa took Caleb to the doctor for a full checkup. The diagnosis was simple but clear: stress-related exhaustion combined with heat and mild dehydration. The doctor gently explained that children often internalize tension, especially during family changes. They try to perform well, stay strong, and avoid causing extra worry. Their bodies sometimes respond before their words do. Marissa heard that explanation and felt guilt settle heavily in her. She blamed herself immediately. She replayed every late-night work shift and every bill she had worried about within earshot. She remembered the quiet moments when Caleb had asked if everything was be okay, and she had answered with a smile she hoped. That night, after Caleb had gone to his room, Marissa sat alone at her kitchen table staring at the season schedule. Baseball fees were not small. Gas for travel games added up. Equipment costs never seemed to. She began to consider pulling him out of the league after the season ended. It would ease some pressure. It would give him more rest. At least that was what she told herself. What she did not realize was that Caleb had paused in the hallway outside when he heard part of her quiet phone call with the league treasurer about possible refunds. He did not hear every word, but he understood enough. He believed his exhaustion had caused a problem. He believed he had become an extra burden. The next day at practice, Caleb was quieter than usual. He smiled when the triplets approached him, but there was a guarded look behind it. Avery noticed first. She had always been the most observant. Nolan sensed it soon after. Reese stayed close without asking direct questions. Children as emotional gatekeepers do not need full explanations. They feel the shift. Grant watched from the sidelines and felt a familiar ache. Years ago, during one tight financial season, he had overheard Avery telling her siblings they should stop asking for news because Dad already worked too hard. That moment had shaken him. He had realized how easily children try to carry adult. He decided not to let that happen again. After practice, Grant walked beside Marissa toward the parking lot. He spoke calmly and without pressure. He mentioned that he often drove to extra batting cages with his triplets and that there was always room in the car. He suggested shared practice time to lighten her schedule. He offered to split snack duties for games so costs would not fall on one. Not heroic, just practical. Marissa struggled with accepting help. She had learned to stand alone because standing alone felt safer than depending on someone who might. Single-parent resilience had become her shield, but she also saw how natural the support looked when the triplets included Caleb without. It did not feel like charity. It felt like community. The emotional ridge between them strengthened slowly. Grant did not try to fix everything. He simply stayed consistent. The triplets treating Caleb as if he had always been part of their circle. They sent him funny videos after school and asked about his math test result. They included him in simple backyard games. They never mentioned the doctor visit directly. They just stayed. The rest of the community still watched from a distance. Some parents remained polite but cool. Others avoided deeper interaction. Yet a few began to soften slightly, noticing how Caleb's smile returned during practices. Unexpected kindness has a quiet influence. It changes rooms without demanding attention. Marissa began to see that pulling Caleb out of baseball might not protect him the way she hoped. The field was not the source of pressure. Isolation was. And slowly, that isolation was fading. For a brief moment, it felt like stability might settle in. Then, late one evening, Marissa received an email from the lead. The subject line was formal and concerning. An anonymous complaint had been filed about her behavior at games. The message stated that concerns had been raised regarding sideline conduct and team environment. Her hands trembled as she Just as support had begun to grow around her, someone had decided to push back, and this time, the pressure would not stay. The real test was never about baseball, it was about who would stay when the pressure grew louder. The email from the league board requested Marissa's presence at a formal meeting the following Thursday. The wording was polite but firm. Concerns had been raised. Conduct would be. It felt official enough to make her hands shake. She read the message twice, then a third time, trying to understand what she could have done wrong. She had never shouted at referees. She had never argued with other parents. She had only stood near the fence and clapped for her son. Still, rumors have a way of shaping reality when repeated often enough. On the evening of the meeting, Marissa considered going. She was used to facing hard rooms by herself, but when she arrived at the small community center where the board gathered, she was not alone. Grant stood near the entrance with the triplets beside him. He did not make a dramatic gesture. He simply nodded and walked in with her as the most natural thing in the world. The room felt formal and slightly tense. A long table held printed papers and bottled water. Several board members sat in neat rows of chairs. A few parents were present as observers. Whispers moved quietly through the. Grant pulled out a chair for the triplets in the back corner, allowing them to sit quietly. He chose a seat beside Marissa without hesitation. Children as emotional gatekeepers often sense what adults try to hide. Avery noticed Marissa's hands tremble slightly in her. Nolan saw the way she pressed her lips. Reese leaned, eyes focused, and they did not fully understand the policies being discussed, but they understood when someone felt cornered. The board began by summarizing the It mentioned concerns about negative energy and creating division among parents. The wording sounded heavy, but as details were presented, it became clear how vague the accusations were. No specific incidents. No witnesses described harmful behavior. The claims rested mostly on perception shaped by ongoing gossip. Marissa answered each question calmly. She explained that she stood by the fence because she preferred to see the. She confirmed she had never raised her voice or confronted another parent. Her tone remained steady, when her eyes grew glassy. Single-parent resilience does not always mean being loud. Sometimes it means answering unfair questions with quiet strength. Grant listened until the board invited additional comments. He stood carefully, not to dominate the room but to contribute respectfully. He spoke about what he had observed firsthand. He described Marissa's consistent support for her son. He mentioned how important it is for children to see their parents treated with fairness, especially during difficult life changes. He reminded the board that youth sports should be a space for not silent. His words were calm, clear, and measured. There was no anger in his only sincerity. He did not accuse anyone. He simply spoke about the responsibility adults carry in shaping community environments for children. The tone in the room shifted. A few board members nodded thoughtfully. One parent observer cleared her throat and admitted she had never personally seen Marissa behave poorly. Another mentioned that emotions had been high this season due to scheduling changes and misunderstandings. Slowly, the heavy cloud of assumption began. In the back of the room, Caleb sat quietly, watching. He had not been required to attend, on coming. He wanted to understand what was happening. As he listened to Grant speak respectfully on behalf of fairness, something changed inside. For weeks, he had felt like his family was being judged. Now he saw someone stand beside his mother without hesitation. The board concluded that the allegations were exaggerated and unsupported by evidence. They encouraged all parents to focus on positive sportsmanship moving forward. The meeting ended without penalties or formal warnings. It was not a dramatic victory, but it was a clear one. As people filed out, a few parents offered brief nods toward Marissa. Distance between her and the community had not disappeared completely, but it had narrowed. She no longer stood entirely alone in that room. Grant remained beside her until the last chair was folded away. Outside, under the soft glow of the parking lot lights, Marissa exhaled deeply for the first time all. She thanked Grant quietly. He brushed it off gently, saying that showing up is what matters. The triplets stood nearby, their presence steady and protective. For the first time since her divorce, Marissa felt seen not as a roommate but as a person. Yet as relief settled in, another truth surfaced in her expression. She looked at Grant with a mixture of gratitude and hesitation. She admitted that before this meeting she had already begun researching job listings in another state. She had been planning to move away after the season, believing Caleb would be better off starting fresh somewhere else. Grant felt the weight of that possibility immediately. Just as the walls around her began to fall, Marissa revealed she had been preparing to leave, and now the question was whether she would. She had already packed half her hope into boxes. She just had not told her son yet. After the meeting with the league board, Life did not magically become easy. The whispers faded, but they did not disappear. Still, something had shifted. Marissa no longer felt like she was standing against the world alone, yet the idea of moving away stayed in the back of her mind like a quiet escape plan. She had already searched apartments in another state. She had already updated her resume. Starting over felt safer than risking more rejection. Grant carried his own silent struggle. When Marissa admitted she had been planning to leave, it stirred something deep inside him. He had spent years protecting his heart after his wife left. He had built a life focused on his children, steady and controlled. Letting someone new matter felt dangerous. Attachment meant risk, and risk meant the possibility. That night, after the triplets had fallen asleep, Grant sat at his kitchen table thinking about the past. He remembered how quickly his world had changed once before. He remembered how long it took to rebuild. He had promised himself never to depend on anyone again. Yet over the past few weeks he had begun to look forward to seeing Marissa at games. He had begun to notice how Caleb's laughter blended. The thought of that disappearing unsettled him more than he expected. Meanwhile, the triplets did not hesitate. The next weekend, they invited Caleb to join them at a small park near their house. They included Marissa naturally, asking if she would like to bring snacks. It did not feel like a formal, it felt like routine. Found family often begins in simple spaces, like picnic tables and shared water bottles. Caleb's confidence slowly returned. He ran faster during backyard games. He smiled more easily. He talked about future baseball goals without lowering his voice. The weight he had been carrying alone seemed lighter when surrounded by steady friendship. Children heal faster when they... Marissa noticed the change in her. For months, she had watched him shrink slightly under pressure. Now she saw him expand again, standing taller and speaking louder. She felt safe for the first time in months, not because everything was perfect, but because she was no longer the only adult holding the line. Grant began to understand something important. Presence changes lives. Sitting beside someone in public, showing up in difficult meetings, offering rides to practice. None of it was dramatic, but together those small actions built something strong. He realized that fear of starting over emotionally had been protecting him but also from connection. One evening, while walking to their cars after practice, Marissa admitted she had paused her apartment search. She said it carefully, as if testing the words. She explained that Caleb seemed happier lately, that she had not felt judged and weak, that maybe staying could be an act of courage, and Grant did not rush to respond. He respected how hard that choice was. He simply told her that this town was better when good people did. His voice carried quiet sincerity, not pressure. The community slowly began to warm. A mother from the team offered Marissa extra tickets to a school fundraiser. Another parent asked if Caleb wanted to join a weekend training session. These gestures were small, but they mattered. Acceptance often grows in inches, not miles. The emotional growth between Grant and Marissa remained subtle but steady. There were no dramatic declarations. Instead, there were shared responsibility and respect. They discussed schedules, homework struggles, and grocery prices. They laughed over small moments. They built trust through consistency. Loneliness had once defined both of their lives. Now, being chosen felt possible. As the season moved toward its final stretch, excitement built for the championship. The team had worked hard all year, and Caleb's improvement had not gone unnoticed. He played with new focus, encouraged loudly by the triplets, and supported steadily by his mother. Then, 2 days before the championship, a message circulated through the group chat. Daniel Vaughn had announced he would be attending the final game. He planned to bring businesses and extended family to celebrate. The news spread quickly. Marissa felt her stomach tighten. Caleb went quiet when he heard. Grant saw the tension rise again, like an old shadow returning. Just as Marissa had begun to believe in staying, the championship game threatened to test everything, because this time the man everyone had chosen before. Championship day did not just decide a trophy, it decided who would stay when it mattered most. The field was packed long before the first pitch. Folding chairs stretched across the sidelines, and cars filled every corner of the parking lot. Parents wore team colors proudly. Some carried banners, others balanced coolers and cameras. The energy felt louder than any game before it. For many families, this was just a championship. For Caleb Vaughn, it felt like something much bigger. Marissa arrived early, her steps steady but her heart racing. She had barely slept the night before. She knew Daniel would be. She had heard about the guests he played. She reminded herself that this day was about her son, not about old stories. Still, tension pressed quietly against her confidence. Grant arrived minutes later with the triplets. They carried homemade signs with Caleb's number written in bright marker. Without hesitation, they placed their chairs directly beside Marissa, forming a solid line of support. Grant set his cooler down and gave her a calm nod. No big speech, no dramatic promise, just presence. Then Daniel Vaughn arrived. He walked onto the field area with easy confidence, shaking hands with other parents and smiling widely. Two men in business shirts followed him, along with a relative holding a camera. Several parents stood to greet him warmly. The attention shifted quickly in his direction. The tension in the stands became visible. Conversations paused. Eyes moved between Daniel and Maria. For a brief moment, it felt like the old imbalance might return, but something was different this time. Grant did not move his chair. The triplets did not shift the seats. They remained beside Marissa, steady and unbothered. Their signs rested against their knees. Their loyalty was simple and clear. Caleb stepped onto the field for warm-ups. He noticed his father immediately. A mix of emotions crossed his face: surprise, uncertainty, hope. Then he looked toward the fence. He saw his mother standing tall. He saw Grant seated firmly beside her. He saw Avery, Nolan, and Reese holding signs with his name written boldly. For the first time all season, Caleb did not have to choose. He did not have to search for a missing figure. Both sides of his world were visible. The seat beside his mother was no longer empty. The game began with high intensity. Caleb played with focus and calm energy. He caught a difficult fly ball in the third inning that drew loud applause. When he stepped up to bat later, the crowd leaned forward and Marissa clapped steadily, her voice clear but not desperate. Grant cheered naturally. The triplets stood and waved their signs proudly. Caleb swung clean and strong, sending the ball deep into the outfield. He sprinted around the bases with determination. As he rounded third, he glanced toward the stands again. This time, his expression was. He did not look confused. He did not look torn. He looked secure. The emotional shift was subtle, but powerful. He was no longer performing to he was playing because he loved the game and felt supported from every side. That freedom showed in his movements. The community noticed too. Applause felt genuine. Some parents who had once kept distance now clapped openly for Marissa as she celebrated her son's run. The invisible wall that had separated her from others seemed thinner than ever. Daniel remained present throughout the game, cheering respectfully, but the spotlight no longer defined the moment. What mattered most was Grant had shown up every week. The triplets had chosen their seats again and again. That steady loyalty carried more weight than a single appearance. As the final inning closed and Caleb's team secured a narrow victory, the field erupted in celebration. Teammates lifted each other up. Parents rushed forward with hugs and congratulations. Marissa walked onto the field with calm pride, her shoulders straight and her eyes bright. Grant stood back slightly, allowing her space, yet he remained close enough to remind her she was not alone. Hope-driven emotional redemption does not arrive in dramatic speech. It arrives in small, repeated acts of staying. It grows through shared weekends, honest conversations, and children brave enough to close gaps adults create. Later, as the sun dipped low and families began packing up, Marissa turned toward Grant with quiet gratitude. She no longer spoke about moving away. She spoke about next season, about carpool play, about summer barbecues. The triplets laughed with Caleb as they carried equipment to the cars. They had noticed an empty seat months ago. They had chosen to fill it, and in doing so they had helped build something neither family expected. Isolation had slowly transformed. Sometimes the loudest statement is not what people say. It is the empty seat someone chooses to fill, and the family that forms because no one walked away. If this story meant something to you, don't just watch it and move on. Stories like this grow when people choose to pass them forward, so someone else who feels alone can hear them. Stay connected to this space where small acts of kindness turn into life-changing. And before you go, think about this. If you saw an empty seat beside someone who felt invisible, would you walk past it, or would you choose to sit down? Let me know in the comments.